there.
Hello. How's it going?
Oh, good. How are you guys?
Great. Doing pretty good.
So we're doing this documentary about international and domestic students.
We're making a movie about just international and domestic students and what's happening.
How does it make you feel if I just randomly join you for dinner?
If you want,
Awesome. Relax, you can pull up a chair.
So I'm gonna be honest, I'm nauseous. I'm this close to just puking.
I think that's the meatloaf.
Okay, if I didn't know you and you just came and sat here, I'd just look at you. Well, not look. What the hell? I'd be like, why are you speaking?
Probably ask where you're from, like see what's different, you know.
I don't think like international or wherever somebody's from wouldn't even be like what I would think about if somebody like sat at the table. But
You
yeah.
want to play lacrosse?
Are you?
Okay, I'm pretty sure Bumpsy's gonna play next year.
I believe that there is definitely a gap between the international and the domestic students.
I think it's a good thing that people are talking about it. The first step is always to talk about it.
Other domestic students, like they know each other, so it's like they are making their own cliques, and international students make their own cliques, and so then it's keep going till their senior year.
It's not the same for every international student, and I think depending on where you come from, there's more or less of a split.
I think it's not an incredibly huge gap because there's definitely strong friendships and relationships between domestic and international students.
I don't like that label. I wish we could all just be called students instead of, creating that distinction, because that in itself is already separating people.
I have seen a lot of progress over the years. There's a lot of interaction going on between domestic and international students.
The lack of interaction beats the purpose of having international students in Principia.
When there's a meeting of individuals, like one-on-one, the interactions are pretty good. I think when it's in group settings, the groups tend not to interact as much.
Some of the student workers have made comments about students not coming to them because they're international. We're not appreciated as international students. We're not represented in like student government or like the major clubs on campus. We only have like Whole World Festival, which is once a year, and we have Friendship Around the World, which doesn't even have high memberships.
People don't want to get out of their comfort zone because it would, obviously it would make them uncomfortable, but it would require them to work extra hard.
And while you might feel like you're doing enough just by saying hello in the hallway and introducing yourself to international students around the dorm, that's not really interaction. That's really a kind of surface level interaction.
We just don't understand each other. Like we could if we wanted to.
All we ever seem to do is fight on and on.
International students have a hard time relating to some of the issues or topics that domestic students might be talking about.
What's important to most international students is probably not what is important to most domestic students, thanks to the cultures they're coming from.
I have friends from the soccer team that are international students, but I don't have friends from my baseball team. There are no international students on the baseball team. So I feel like that's just a perfect example of just different interests.
You kind of just go to who you look and feel more comfortable around.
There's always a natural gap happening because international students have gone through a journey that domestic students have not.
As international students, I'm thinking what if they think I'm really stupid? Because some of the international students are not really good at speaking English.
I think it boils down to international students have a week or two before anyone else gets here where they really bond. And I think those bonds, I'm still friends with the people I met my first week.
They all get to know each other more, which is I think it's probably a really good thing because, you come to the United States, you don't know anyone, but here's all these other people in the same groups, in the same situation rather as you.
And that little tiny bond kind of gets wrapped up in the larger international bond.
If you didn't have that orientation and you just threw them into the mix, it might be a whirlwind and they might be, it might be very difficult to get acclimated, but they would bond with all of the other freshmen.
No, it's not just the orientation. This is something I know that we have always been criticized for. Well, it's because, they bond during that 1 week. And I said, well, the interesting thing is that students bond with each other that have not been part of that group.
When you walk into the dining, it's like all the domestic students are, in the middle, and then the international students tend to go to the back corner where the TV is. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
To kind of, I think, to a disconnected observer, it can definitely seem as if that there was almost a conscious decision being made that I want to be with these people and not these people.
Sometimes I do feel there is a segregation in the dining room.
Although even within the domestic students, you can tell this is a soccer table, this is a softball table, this is, here's a track and field table. It's not necessarily simply divided between international and domestic.
And it's not a bad thing because we all have things in common and we like the same things, so we're gonna gravitate towards those people we have things in common with, and I'm gonna be friends with people, gonna laugh at my jokes. If I go tell an African joke at an American person, they'll look at me like I'm crazy.
People are looking at the color of the tables as opposed to the nationalities, because even though we're sitting at the table and we're all Africans, there's like how many countries at that table?
You don't have that normal flow of conversation because they start thinking, oh, you're from a different place, so we're not gonna connect. So it's usually the regular conversation is, oh, where are you from? I'm from Zimbabwe. Oh, that's great. What's it like in Zimbabwe? And it doesn't really go into everyday conversation. It's not like normal conversation, it's forced.
Domestics and a few of the internationals, and mainly of light-colored skin, are sitting together.
Like I actually found this book, Why Do All the Black Kids in the Cafeteria Sit Together? That's the title of the book. I was like, oh my God, this person is describing Fran.
And the issue of accent is never brought up when it's a British accent. It's fancy when it's British, but when it's not British, then or Australian. If it's Australian, it's also pretty. That's so funny. Oh, that's so cute. I want to hear more. But when you're coming from say Chile or wherever place, and you have an accent from that place, it's seen as you're just not educated enough.
You don't really want to change your accent because you don't want to kind of lose that sense of home. And so once you stick with that accent, you're stuck with the burden of struggling, or people struggling to understand you.
Me and Andrew were definitely part of the international crew during the first international week. And then when the Americans started arriving, there seemed to be more of an attention to me and Andrew than the rest of the international students, and it was noticed by people. And I feel like that's partly something to do with the fact that there's more British culture than America.
When we say the divide between international and domestic students, I think that's too general. Because I feel like it's probably maybe the white students and the black students.
And I think it's skin color sometimes. It's because I'm black that people are afraid to approach me because they find me intimidating and hard looking and scary.
The classic example is me and Nikki. Nikki and I are from the exact same place, but she was accepted and absorbed way easier than I was. And this may sound like textbook, but it's almost like it's racism, but people look at this color of your skin and where you're from. I will say that I'm not trying to make this about race. I think it's more complex than just race. I have had classes with people, and during the duration of this class, I thought, oh my God, we're really bonding. Yay, I made a new friend. But at the end of that class, it's like there's no talking. That's the end of the communication. That any kind of connection that I felt we had during the 10 weeks when it was quarters, or 15 weeks now that it's semesters, is all gone. And so it just limits your interaction. You're like, what's the point of trying to get to know someone if 10 weeks later we're not going to be talking?
The perception that we get here in the United States, and I'm sure around the world outside of Africa, is that it's kind of generally war-torn, impoverished, rampant with disease. It's certainly, I think it's dangerous to make that generalization because it does jeopardize our relationship here on campus.
Being European is seen as a very good thing. being Latin American is somewhat familiar in the US context, but being African is not cool.
It's kind of difficult to have a normal conversation without someone saying, oh, so where do you guys live? Do you guys have electricity in your houses? So do you guys live in actual houses? Do you guys live in trees? So do you go to school? Do you have toilets? Oh my gosh.
When Principia organizes events with African speakers, they don't help break those stereotypes about Africa. For people who still keep getting the same messages about Africa being about AIDS, orphans, what else? Orphans that Madonna is gonna adopt, starving babies, wars and corny 2012. For people who that is the only perception of our continent, which happens to have 53 countries and is not one big homogenous thing, no one's gonna be able to break away from that.
It's all about healing ignorance.
When there is a separation between cultures, it's just simply a lack of understanding.
I think there's a lot of forced things you can do, but I think it needs to come from a kind of a natural place.
There's not a whole lot you can do from like a school standpoint. Like the school can't enforce rules to make people like hang out.
What you need to realize is that just because you're an international student doesn't mean you need to create that barrier between you.
But for those who are aware of it and want to affect change, I think it takes just doing it, you know.
Reach out, talk to them. Don't feel uncomfortable about talking to them.
Be inclusive. Whether it is somebody sitting by themselves, you know, in the dining room, to go up to somebody, maybe you don't even know that person at all, and to say, you know, can I join you?
Even if there's all black people sitting at a table, you're more than welcome to come and join us. I'm always happy to meet new people.
I would encourage the domestic students to be patient enough to listen harder, listen more.
I'm not saying let's be best friends and hold hands and intermingle and sit at tables together. What I'm saying is that people need to think and realize that when we're sitting at a table, it's not because we want to be separated from the community.
Just because a domestic student has to say what 5 times to just try and understand what an international student is saying is okay. I mean, you guys have different accents. You shouldn't look at it as like, this person is weird, he can't speak right.
So if you're scared to offend someone, I'd rather you say something that offends me and then I tell you don't do that because it's offensive, and next time you know not to say that.
Actually, you know, compared to my freshman year, it's getting really better. You know, I'm seeing a lot of international students who's sitting like in field and eating something.
In the end, we all have to be united and work together for something that we love. It's our religion, and our religion says, hey, look at one another like, I mean, there's no difference.
Really getting rid of that thought that we're different and we can't be friends because we're different.
I've seen a lot of efforts, like people trying to make it better. And I think it's like really good time to do it. And I really appreciate that little movement. And I bet like this little movement and little steps will make a big step.
It's fun to have like a much more diverse group of friends than I might have somewhere else, and I really enjoy getting to know people that I might not know otherwise.
Going to class and there's like people from like 6 other countries, and just like, I don't know, it's just like a really beautiful thing, and I really appreciate it a lot.
There's so much that we share in common. It's so much greater than what we don't. And what we don't share in common, that's great. That's what we should be looking for in college.
And instead of just keeping it for yourself, share it and embrace it. Because our cultures are beautiful, especially when they're being shared and appreciated.